This is the Intrinsic Report. Be informed, be inspired.
Previously, in the reign of the Sons of Heaven, we saw how the Zhou kings codified the religion in which they were deified. They also introduced land reforms that helped decentralize monarchical authority. However, their claims to divinity and efforts at decentralization did not prevent corruption at the power center. As the mandate of heaven departed from the Zhou, 100 schools of thought emerged, each proposing a remedy to the political crisis. Therefore, as the Zhou's authority weakened and different states clashed on the battlefield, it was clear the time for long-winded debates was over. In Darwinian terms, it all came down to survival for the fittest. This is the story of how the first empire of China was formed. The Qin were among Huaxia people that had settled along the Wei tributary of the Yellow River Valley since the Neolithic times. They claimed descent from Huangdi, a pre-dynastic Yellow River emperor credited for his military prowess and laying the foundational structures for the Chinese people. During the Xia and Shang period, the Qin led a semi-barbarian frontier life. What this means is that from the steppe nomads, they absorbed customs such as shamanism, tribal ethos, and martial vigor. But from successive Chinese dynasties, they adopted the aristocratic culture, especially the Zhou's bronze ritual. So, although adapting to organized settlements, they remained rooted in frontier survival. The Qin began to rise under the Zhou kings, who implemented feudalism, granting land to loyal followers and nobles known as vassals or dukes. The Qin stood out particularly for their exceptional military contributions. Under Duke Xiang, the Qin gained prestige by aiding the Zhou against the Rong and the invaders, integrating the Qin into the Zhou feudal order. During the philosophical explosion of the Warring States period, an intellectual exiled from the Wei state made attempts at shopping his talents and brilliance to the Duke of the Qin state. The scholar's name is Shang Yang. He first introduced Confucianism and Taoism to Duke Qiao, which failed to impress. Hence, in the next meeting, Shang Yang presented legalist concepts. This time, the Duke was receptive. One of the legalist propositions Shang Yang made was that integrity of a state could be maintained only with power, and that power consisted of a large army and full granaries. By this winning argument, Duke Qiao let Shang Yang carry out a series of reforms that boosted military conscription, ended feudalism, centralized power, and made the king immensely wealthy. One of Shang Yang's populist reforms was that commoners of Qin could get noble titles because of their military achievements, mainly based on how many heads of the enemies one had cut off. As we've seen before, not every reform that pleases the king is welcomed by nobles. Shang Yang became deeply hated by the Qin nobility, who lost hereditary titles and legal immunity under the new legislation. In the end, the nobles framed him for treason and had the full force of the very collective punishment laws he introduced applied on him and his loved ones. Though Shang Yang was executed as a criminal, his legal reforms weren't reversed. Thus, his successful reorganization of the Qin transformed it into one of the most disciplined and centralized state of the Warring States period. Under King ZhaoXiang, Infrastructure and bureaucracy matured. Roads, canals, storehouses, all tools for the eventual conquest machine. The Qin's unrivaled administrative and military apparatus led to the defeat of the remaining 6 larger states, one after the other, under Ying Zheng. Through mass conscriptions, sophisticated siege warfare, and armed cavalry, the Qin carried out untold massacres to bring about a decisive end to the warring states period. How can heaven's mandate return to the Middle Kingdom? Well, the Qin's answer, not by endless philosophy, but at the tip of raining arrows. The Qin's ruthlessness had made them victorious conquerors. But can the same martial discipline help them run an empire? Let's find out. Following the successful unification of China, Ying Zhen assumed the title Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. This title commemorates Huangdi, the warrior and pre-dynastic ruler of the Yellow River earlier mentioned. Shi Huang saw himself as a cosmic emperor, asserting heaven's mandate through imperial tours to sacred mountains, where he would etch his legitimacy in stone as the forger of empire under heaven. He would rule as a divine sovereign, backed by an absolute bureaucracy, an unprecedented concentration of power. The age of the Qin was marked by territorial consolidation, construction, standardization, centralization, and legalism. Qin Shi Huang developed plans to fortify Qin's northern border to protect against invasions from 5 barbarian tribes known as the Xiang. We've encountered the Xiang before. They are Xia-era exiles. After the fall of the Xia, one group fled to the south, while another migrated northward and was believed to be the ancestors of the nomadic Xiang, setting the stage for future hostilities and invasions. The resulting construction formed the base of what later became the Great Wall of China. Shi Huang commissioned the Terracotta Army and Mausoleum at Mount Li, having envisioned himself as the originator of an eternal empire. Believing that his empire was eternal, Shi Huang sought to make himself immortal. He dispatched expeditions to find divine herbs and elixirs, even to islands of the Eastern Sea near Japan. The emperor's desperation made him increasingly dependent on court alchemists who exploited his fears by producing potions, many containing mercury and toxic minerals. Ironically, these elixirs of life took a toll on his health. An important statesman of the late Warring States period who was sought after during the early days of the Qin is Li Si. He had studied legalism under the famous philosopher Hunzi, alongside Han Fei, another influential legalist thinker. Now, if you'd like to brush up on the philosophical schools of thought emerging in the final days of the Zhou, check out the previous video in the series. From his teacher, Li Si absorbed the idea that strict laws and centralized authority were the only way to control society and ensure stability. Frustrated with limited opportunity in his home state, Chu, Li Si migrated west to Qin, where ambitious rulers valued reformers and outsiders. He soon became a trusted advisor to the young King Zhen, now emperor. Qin Shi Huang turned to his ruthless legalist chancellor, Li Si, to execute ideological warfare of empire-wide standardization and conformity. The process began by issuing decrees that all carts had to have the same axle width, which facilitated the development of a unified transportation system within China. Coinage was unified next. The Qin coins that were round with a square hole in the middle for easy carrying on a string became the official currency all over China. Following this, the Chinese written characters that the Qin used were enforced as the new national standard. Later, the feudal system was abolished and replaced with a centralized bureaucratic system, or a system of prefectures and counties, each one ruled by a commandery that answered directly to the emperor. Finally, a unified state ideology was created, casting aside Confucianism, Taoism, Moism, and any other in favor of legalism. According to legalist philosophy, all people are selfish and greedy by nature and will always try to maximize their personal gain while minimizing their personal loss. Therefore, the ruler of the state had to wisely govern upon the concepts of reward and punishment. Hence, Qin laws weren't just simply passed by the ruler, but their existence and promulgation were effectively disseminated all around the Qin Empire to make sure that everyone knew about them. The penalty for breaking those rules and laws, even if minor criminal offenses, was often severe. That could mean amputation of body parts, death, banishment, and so on. Shi Huang became intolerant of any threats to his rule upon 3 failed attempts on his life. Now paranoid, Shi Huang ordered an empire-wide purge. He had Li Si carry out a book ban on subjects he did not consider useful, that is, any literature outside of legalism, medicine, agriculture, and math. To ensure the complete eradication of all unwelcome ideas, Shi Huang banned all other ideologies and ordered that all scholars of these ideas, and who therefore knew them by heart, be buried alive, thus preventing the further oral dissemination of these ideas. The outcome of the reforms and purges, a universal Chinese empire, a single political system stretching from the Yellow River in the north to the Yangtze in the south. Beneath all the monumental achievements lay exhaustion and fear. The emperor's divine abstractions, the mechanistic bureaucratic state, the harsh corporal punishments, and rigid ideological control resulted in public fatigue, resentment, and existential unease. Qin Shi Huang died unexpectedly in 210 BC in an attempt to procure an elixir of immortality from Taoist magicians. His death started a succession crisis, revealing how brutal the Qin's political order was. 2 court officials, Minister Li Si and eunuch Zhao Gao, initially covered up the king's death until they could get back to the capital and oversee a peaceful transition. Qin Shi Huang was buried in a massive tomb, an elaborate structure with various chambers and treasures, including the famous Terracotta Army. The rightful heir to the throne, Fusu, was known to be upright, humane, and often critical of his father's harsh legalist policies. He even spoke in defense of the persecuted Confucian scholars. To get him out of the way and secure their hold on state power, Li Si and Zhao Gao fabricated a suicide edict from the late emperor to Fusu, who obliged owing to his sense of honor and filial piety. stupidity, I would say. The throne passed to the youngest son, Qin Er Shi. He was an unprepared puppet, wholly controlled by Zhao Gao. The years ahead saw the Qin Empire weakened by oppressive taxation and forced labor. Then, a famine struck, pushing the Qin society over the edge. The Zhao era mandate of heaven, requiring rulers to live a scrupulous life, which when he didn't, he would be held responsible for disasters and catastrophes such as bad harvests, began to play out. Moreover, it didn't help that Qin Er Shi lacked legitimacy, charisma, and independence in the eyes of the public. It was obvious to all that he was dominated by Zhao Gao. Two military conscripts, Sheng and Guang, began stirring up a rebellion of army men and peasants against the Qing. As rebellions spread across the empire, the emperor became increasingly paranoid and suspicious of his advisors. Zhao Gao steadily manipulated Qin Er Shi, whispering against other ministers and generals. He convinced the emperor that the rebellions and unrests were the fault of disloyal officials, while in fact Zhao Gao's own cruel policies are what fueled the instability. And even though Li Si had helped him install the puppet emperor, Zhao Gao accused Li Si of treason, claiming that Li Si secretly sympathized with rebels and was plotting to overthrow the young emperor. Accuse your enemy of what you are intending to do yourself, sort of thing. Li Si was arrested. Broken by fear and pain, he confessed under duress to crimes he never committed. He was executed by the gruesome punishment of being sawed in two at the waist, a method he himself had devised for traitors. His entire family was executed as well, under collective punishment laws he had once upheld. Fearing the young emperor would figure him out, Zhao Gao and his guards made Er Shi abdicate the throne to avoid further revolts. Er Shi committed suicide thereafter. Zhao Gao, being a eunuch, realized he couldn't rule as an emperor himself. He therefore appointed Ziying, another member of the Qin royal family. However, the empire was collapsing under rebellion. In order to have any credibility, Ziying needed to show strength and cut off the poisonous influence at court. Ziying lured Zhao Gao into a palace audience and instead of honoring him, ordered soldiers to kill him on the spot. And although it helped to rally what little support the Qin throne still had, by then the empire was too far gone. Meanwhile, Sheng and Guang failed to topple the Qin. While they had sparked massive resistance, they lacked the organizational unity and legitimacy to sustain it. In the end, Guang's officers murdered him during a mutiny, claiming he was incompetent. Sheng, having proclaimed himself king prematurely, was assassinated by aides after alienating his supporters by his authoritarian rule. Despite their deaths, their revolt fatally weakened the Qin, opening the way for the dynasty's fall to the forces of a low-born Han official just 3 years later. Even though only running for 14 years, the shortest of any major dynasty in Chinese history, the Qin is credited as the originator of the Chinese imperial system that would endure in some form until the 20th century. The military and administrative practices instituted by the Qin laid the groundwork for the succeeding Han Empire. The Qin cycle, although compressed, offered a decisive answer to the existential question posed by the collapse of the Zhou. Heaven's favor can only return to the Middle Empire through martial ferocity. The Qin's triumph was also its undoing. Legalist rigidity, ideological repression, and over-centralization created a brittle system that collapsed within a generation. Which could only mean one thing. There had to be a better way to long-lasting peace in Heaven's Middle Empire. That's all I had for you in this episode. Coming down the pipe is the Golden Age of the Han. Make sure you're subscribed to be notified when episodes in this series are released. Let us know in the comments if you are informed or inspired. I've been your host, Martin K, for the Intrinsic Report. Catch you in the next one. Peace.